The emergency beacon cut through the silence of the bridge like a blade through silk. Captain Zethkara's forearms moved in practiced coordination across the holographic displays, her scaled fingers dancing over the controls as the distress signal painted itself in crimson across the star charts. Unknown vessel. This is the merchant freighter Blessed Prophets. We are under attack by pirate forces. Our shields are failing, and we cannot break free from their tractor beam. Please, anyone who receives this message, send help. The voice carried the universal terror that transcended species barriers. Zethkara had heard it countless times during her 3 decades of service with the Galactic Peacekeeping Forces. The desperation was always the same, whether it came from the crystalline throat of a Veltar trader or the harmonious vocal cords of an Ashanti merchant. "Ma'am, we're receiving the beacon from the Kepler 442 system," reported Lieutenant Vexanael from his position at the sensor array. His tentacles writhed with nervous energy as he processed the incoming data. That's deep in contested space. Pirates have been hitting trade routes there for months. Zethkara's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The Blessed Prophets was a Terran vessel, registered out of the Sol system. Humans had only joined the Galactic Federation 15 years ago, but their merchant marine had quickly established itself as one of the most reliable in known space. They paid their fees on time, followed trade regulations, and generally caused little trouble for the peacekeepers. "Time to intercept?" she asked, already knowing the answer would be problematic. 18 hours at maximum burn, Captain, came the reply from Navigation Officer Kathmos. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he ran the calculations. "But that's assuming the pirates don't finish their business and jump to hyperspace before we arrive." The mathematics were simple and brutal. Pirate raids rarely lasted more than an hour. By the time the GPF cruiser Harmony's Edge reached the Kepler 442 system, they would find nothing but debris and perhaps a few escape pods if the crew was fortunate. "Ma'am," Vexanael's voice carried an odd note. "I'm reading something unusual from the distress beacon. The Blessed Prophets is transmitting additional data packets." "Elaborate, Lieutenant." "It appears to be a personnel manifest and some kind of authorization codes I don't recognize. The encryption is definitely Terran military grade." Zethkara's scales rippled with interest. Humans were still largely mysterious to most of the galaxy. Their homeworld, which they called Earth, was classified as a Class 12 Deathworld by the Galactic Survey Corps. The classification meant that any planet harboring such extreme conditions would typically produce life forms too primitive or too aggressive to achieve spaceflight. Humans had proven that assumption spectacularly wrong. "Display the manifest," she ordered. The holographic display shimmered, revealing a list of names and designations that meant little to most of the bridge crew. But Zethkara had made it her business to study human military structure during their integration into the Federation. Sergeant Marcus Chun, 15th Reconnaissance Battalion Corporal Sarah Martinez, Special Operations Division Lieutenant James Walker, Counterterrorism Unit Specialist David Kim, Explosive Ordnance Disposal Captain Elena Vasquez, Strategic Operations Command. "These aren't civilian merchants," she whispered, her translator struggling with the human names. "Ma'am." Vexanael's confusion rippled through his chromatophore patches. "These are human military personnel. Special forces, by the look of it." Zethkara's mind raced through the implications. What would human special operations soldiers be doing aboard a merchant freighter in contested space? Before anyone could answer, a new signal pierced the comm channels. This one was different. Where the original distress call had carried panic and desperation, this transmission was cold, professional, and utterly calm. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez aboard the merchant vessel Blessed Prophets. We are currently engaged with hostile forces. To any galactic peacekeeping vessels receiving this transmission, we advise you to maintain safe distance. We are implementing Directive 77 Alpha. Estimated time to resolution, 37 minutes. The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Directive 77 Alpha? Lieutenant Vexanael's tentacles had gone pale with confusion. That's not in any GPF operational manual I know. Zethkara was already pulling up the files she'd accumulated on human military doctrine. The Federation had been given only basic information about human armed forces capabilities during the integration process. Most species were required to provide detailed military assessments, but the humans had been granted an exemption due to what they termed operational security concerns. Now she was beginning to understand why. Long-range sensors, maximum resolution, she ordered. I want to know what's happening in that system. The main display shifted to show the tactical situation 18 light hours away. The images were grainy and suffered from the lag of faster-than-light sensor transmission, but they told a clear story. 6 pirate vessels had surrounded the lone merchant freighter. The pirates were using a standard intimidation formation. Heavy cruisers positioned to deliver devastating broadsides, while smaller ships maintained the tractor beam lock. The Blessed Prophets appeared helpless, its engines dark and weapons offline. It was a textbook pirate raid, the kind that had been playing out across the galaxy for millennia. The pirates would board the merchant ship, steal whatever cargo seemed valuable, and either ransom the crew or sell them into slavery, depending on market conditions. "Ma'am, I'm detecting weapons discharge," Vexanael reported, his voice tight with concentration. "The pirates have begun their assault." But something was wrong with the tactical display. The sensor readings didn't match what should be happening. According to the data, the weapons fire was coming from the Blessed Prophets, not toward it. "Check your instruments, Lieutenant. The readings must be corrupted." "I've run 3 separate diagnostic cycles, Captain. The sensors are functioning normally." On the display, one of the pirate cruisers suddenly went dark. Its power signature vanished so completely that for a moment Vexanael thought it had jumped to hyperspace. Then, the debris field began expanding outward from where the ship had been. "What just happened?" Zethkara demanded. I'm not certain, ma'am. The vessel appears to have suffered a catastrophic reactor failure, but I'm not detecting any incoming fire that could have caused such damage." As they watched, a second pirate ship began exhibiting unusual behavior. Its engines fired erratically, sending it tumbling out of formation. Warning lights flickered across its hull as secondary explosions bloomed along its weapon emplacements. "Captain," Communications Officer HFY spoke up from his station. "I'm intercepting pirate communications. They're reporting boarding actions." "Impossible. The Blessed Prophets is surrounded. How could they be boarding the pirate vessels?" "I don't know, ma'am. But they're requesting immediate assistance and wait." HFY's frilled head crest flattened against his skull in distress. The transmissions just stopped. On the tactical display, a third pirate vessel went dark. The remaining 3 ships broke formation, their captains apparently deciding that whatever cargo the merchant freighter carried wasn't worth this level of casualties. But as they attempted to withdraw, something impossible happened. The Blessed Prophets, which had been dead in space with its engines offline, suddenly blazed to life. Its acceleration curve shot beyond anything a civilian freighter should be capable of. Within minutes, it had positioned itself between the fleeing pirates and their escape vector. "Ma'am, the merchant ship is hailing the pirates," HFY reported. "Put it through." The voice that emerged from the speakers was the same one that had delivered the earlier professional assessment. Captain Elena Vasquez sounded as calm as if she were discussing the weather. "Pirate vessels, this is the merchant ship Blessed Prophets. You are ordered to surrender immediately. Cut your engines, drop your shields, and prepare to be boarded. You have 60 seconds to comply." The response from the pirates was predictable. Weapons fire erupted from all 3 remaining ships, focused on the lone freighter that had somehow destroyed half their fleet. The Blessed Prophets should have been vaporized under the combined assault. Instead, the merchant ship began to dance. There was no other word for it. The freighter moved with an elegance and precision that defied everything Zethkara knew about space combat. It spun and twisted through the weapon's fire like a predator playing with its prey. Return fire sparked from hidden weapon emplacements along its hull, each shot placed with surgical precision. In less than 5 minutes, the battle was over. 3 more pirate ships drifted powerless in space, their crews presumably dead or captured. The Blessed Prophets hung motionless among the wreckage, its hull unmarked by enemy fire. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez," came the transmission. "Hostile forces have been neutralized. We are standing by for galactic peacekeeping forces to take custody of surviving personnel and vessels. Be advised that we have detained 43 pirates for processing. 43 prisoners from 6 ships that had supposedly been destroyed or crippled beyond repair. Zethkara's mind struggled to process the implications. Lieutenant Vex and AL, scan those pirate vessels again. Ma'am, I'm reading minimal life support on all 6 ships. They appear to have been disabled rather than destroyed, despite the apparent explosions we observed. And their weapon systems? Completely offline. In fact, it looks like someone surgically removed key components from their power distribution networks. The ships are intact, but completely helpless. Zethkara stared at the tactical display for long moments, trying to understand what she had witnessed. A single merchant freighter had encountered 6 pirate vessels, and not only survived but captured the entire force without sustaining damage. More than that, they had done it with such precision that the pirates were left alive and their ships recoverable. Ma'am, Communications Officer Heltoes interrupted her thoughts. We're receiving another transmission from the Blessed Prophets. Let me hear it. We'll remain on station until you arrive to take custody of the prisoners. The transmission paused, and when Vasquez's voice returned, it carried a note that might have been amusement. Also, Captain, my crew would appreciate it if you could avoid mentioning the specific details of this engagement in your official report. The classification protocols surrounding human special operations are rather strict, and we'd prefer to keep our capabilities understated. The line went dead, leaving the bridge of the Harmony's edge in stunned silence. Set course for the Kepler 442 system, Zethkara finally ordered. Maximum burn. Ma'am, should I prepare a full tactical response team for prisoner transfer? Zethkara considered the question. Standard procedure would be to treat this as a potential hostile situation until all details could be verified. But something told her that the humans aboard the Blessed Prophets were beyond such considerations. No, Lieutenant. I think a standard diplomatic escort will be sufficient. As the Harmony's edge entered hyperspace, Zethkara found herself wondering what other surprises the humans were keeping hidden. If this was what their merchants were capable of, what did their actual military look like? Somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that perhaps the galaxy's other species had been asking the wrong questions about humanity. Instead of wondering how a Deathworld species had achieved spaceflight, perhaps they should have been asking what kind of beings could survive on such a world in the first place. The answer to that question, she was beginning to suspect, was something the galaxy wasn't prepared to face. 18 hours later, as the Harmony's edge dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, Zethkara got her first close look at the aftermath of the battle. The 6 pirate vessels hung in perfect formation, their hulls intact but their weapon arrays neatly dismantled. It looked less like the result of a battle and more like the work of a precision salvage operation. The Blessed Prophets waited nearby, its plain civilian hull giving no hint of the capabilities hidden beneath. As Zethkara's ship approached, she found herself studying the human vessel with new eyes, looking for clues about how it had accomplished the impossible. She found none. Whatever modifications the humans had made to their merchant ship were invisible to her sensors. For all appearances, it was exactly what it claimed to be, a simple cargo freighter going about its business. But Zethkara had seen what it could do when that business turned deadly. The prisoner transfer proceeded without incident. Captain Vasquez and her team were professional, courteous, and utterly unremarkable in their interactions with the GPF personnel. They handed over 43 pirate prisoners, all alive and unharmed despite having been involved in what should have been a devastating battle. The pirates themselves seemed to be in a state of shock. When questioned, they spoke in whispers about shadows that moved without sound and weapons that struck without warning. Several claimed that their ships had been boarded by ghosts who disabled entire crews without raising an alarm. Zethkara filed her report 3 days later, after careful consideration of Captain Vasquez's request for discretion. The official record stated that GPF forces had responded to a distress call and found the pirate vessels disabled by unknown means. The crew of the Blessed Prophets had been rescued unharmed, and all hostile personnel had been taken into custody. It was, technically, the complete truth. But, as Zethkara sealed the report and transmitted it to GPF headquarters, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had witnessed something that would change the galaxy's understanding of human capabilities forever. Somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of the Federation, Someone was going to read between the lines of her report and start asking very uncomfortable questions. Questions about what else the humans might be hiding behind their carefully maintained facade of peaceful merchants and diplomatic cooperation. Questions that, if answered honestly, might make the other species of the galaxy very nervous indeed. The humans called their world a death world, and the galaxy had accepted that designation as a simple statement of environmental classification. But Zethkara was beginning to understand that it might be something far more significant. It might be a warning. Admiral Kexthara stood before the curved, transparasteel windows of Station Prime, watching the endless flow of ships arriving and departing from the Galactic Federation's administrative heart. Each vessel represented a different species, a different world, a different perspective on the vast community that had grown to encompass nearly 3,000 inhabited systems. But today his attention was focused on a single ship report that had landed on his desk 12 hours ago. Computer, display Captain Zethkara's incident report from the Kepler 442 system. The holographic display materialized before him, showing the dry, clinical language that characterized official GPF documentation. But Kexthara had been reading between the lines of military reports for over 4 decades. The careful word choices, the diplomatic phrasing, the subtle omissions all told a story that the official narrative left untold. Admiral, the voice belonged to Colonel Fetnai, his chief intelligence officer. The scarred veteran's cybernetic eye glowed softly as it processed the same data streams that had captured Kexthara's attention. What do you make of this, Colonel? Fetnai's remaining organic eye studied the report with professional interest. 6 pirate vessels, completely disabled, crew captured alive. 0 casualties among the merchants. No damage to the civilian vessel. He paused, considering. Either Captain Zethkara is leaving out significant details, or we have seriously underestimated human capabilities. Pull up everything we have on the species designated as human. Full classification review. The display shifted, revealing the accumulated intelligence the Federation had gathered on humanity during their 15-year membership. The data was surprisingly sparse for such an important member species, but what existed painted a contradictory picture. Humans came from a Class 12 death world designated as Earth or Terra in their local languages. The classification indicated a planet so hostile that complex life should theoretically be impossible. Yet somehow, humans had not only survived but thrived, eventually developing faster than light travel and establishing trade relationships across dozens of systems. Their physical specifications were unremarkable by galactic standards. They were bipedal, carbon-based, with relatively short lifespans and limited sensory capabilities compared to most spacefaring species. They had no natural armor, no redundant organs, no obvious physical advantages that would explain their success as a species. Admiral, look at this. Fetnai highlighted a section of the report. According to the medical examinations conducted during their Federation application process, humans have an unusually high concentration of stress hormones in their bloodstream. The examining physicians noted it as a potential health concern. Stress hormones. Adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine. Chemicals that most species produce only during extreme emergency situations. Humans appear to maintain elevated levels as a baseline normal condition. Kexthara's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. What did the medical board conclude? That it was likely an evolutionary adaptation to their hostile homeworld. They recommended monitoring, but took no action. The levels weren't high enough to indicate immediate health risks. But now, in light of the Kepler 442 incident, those stress hormones took on a different significance. What if they weren't a potential health problem, but a performance enhancement? What if humans existed in a constant state of mild battle readiness that other species only achieved during combat situations? Computer, expand search parameters. I want every incident report involving human vessels for the past 5 years. The display filled with dozens of entries. Most were routine trade disputes, navigation errors, or minor technical failures. The kind of mundane incidents that filled the reports of any spacefaring species. But scattered among the routine entries were anomalies. A human cargo vessel had been attacked by pirates near the Vegas system 18 months ago. According to the report, the pirates had fled after their initial boarding attempt failed. The human captain had reported mechanical difficulties with the boarding tubes, suggesting equipment failure had prevented the pirates from accessing their ship. 6 months later, another human freighter had been approached by raiders in the Centauri sector. The raiders had simply broken off their attack and departed without explanation. The human crew reported no contact with the hostile vessels. 3 months ago, a human passenger liner had been threatened by a group demanding protection money in the Sirius trade corridor. The threatening ships had been found drifting powerless 2 days later, their crews claiming they had suffered simultaneous system failures across their entire fleet. "Colonel, do you notice a pattern here?" Fetnai's cybernetic eye whirred as it processed the data at superhuman speed. Statistically speaking, human vessels have a significantly lower rate of successful piracy attacks than any other major trading species. In fact, the success rate is so low it approaches zero. And yet humans claim no military escorts for their merchant marine, none that appear in official records. Kextara stepped closer to the display, studying the scattered reports with growing unease. Each incident, viewed in isolation, could be explained by bad luck on the part of the pirates, equipment failures, or simple coincidence. But, taken together, they suggested something far more disturbing. Computer, access Federation military database. Search for any references to human special operations capabilities. The system processed the request for several seconds before displaying a single line of text. Classified. Authorization level Omega required. Kextara stared at the security warning in shock. Omega level classification was reserved for information that could threaten the stability of the entire Federation. In 45 years of service, he had encountered fewer than a dozen documents requiring such clearance. "Colonel, what is your current security clearance?" "Alpha 7, Admiral." "Same as yours." "Then, neither of us has access to information about human military capabilities." The implications hung in the air between them like a toxic cloud. The Federation operated on principles of transparency and mutual cooperation. Member species were required to share technological and military information to ensure collective security and prevent any single faction from gaining overwhelming advantages. If human military data was classified beyond their clearance level, it meant that information was being withheld at the highest levels of government. "Admiral," Fetnai's voice carried a note of concern. "I'm detecting an incoming priority transmission from the Security Council." "Display it." The hologram shifted to show the angular features of Counselor Velshawn, chairman of the Federation Security Committee. His crystalline skin reflected the lights of his office in prismatic patterns that indicated high stress levels. "Admiral Kextara, you are to immediately suspend any investigation into the Kepler 442 incident. All related files are to be classified at beta level and restricted to essential personnel only." Kextara felt his scales bristle with indignation. "Counselor, with respect, 6 pirate vessels were neutralized by a single merchant freighter. This represents a significant security matter that requires—" "The matter has been reviewed by the appropriate authorities," Velshawn interrupted. "The incident has been classified as a successful rescue operation conducted by GPF forces. Captain Zethkara's report will be amended accordingly." "You're ordering me to falsify official records." "I am ordering you to ensure that sensitive information does not compromise ongoing security operations." Velshawn's prismatic patterns shifted to deep blue, indicating the conversation was approaching dangerous territory. "Admiral, there are aspects of Federation security that operate beyond your current clearance level. This incident touches on those aspects." The transmission ended, leaving Kextara staring at empty air. "Well," Fetnai said after a moment, "that was illuminating, was it? Because I feel more confused than ever. Think about it, Admiral. What would prompt the Security Council to classify a pirate raid at beta level? What could be so sensitive about human merchant vessels that even discussing their capabilities requires Omega clearance?" Kextara turned away from the display and began pacing across his office. The Federation had been built on principles of openness and cooperation between species. Each member world contributed its unique strengths to the collective good while sharing information freely to prevent misunderstandings or conflicts. But if humans were hiding military capabilities significant enough to warrant Omega classification, what did that say about the Federation's founding principles? More importantly, What did it say about humanity's true intentions? Colonel, I want you to conduct an informal investigation. Nothing that would show up in official records. Talk to people who've had direct contact with human vessels. Traders, customs officials, port authorities. Find out what they've seen, but haven't reported. Sir, that would violate the Security Council's directive. The Security Council ordered me to suspend the official investigation and classify existing records. They said nothing about informal intelligence gathering. Kextara's smile showed too many teeth. Besides, I'm curious to see how far this rabbit hole goes. Over the next 3 days, Fetnai's informal network produced a steady stream of disturbing intelligence. None of it rose to the level of official documentation, but the patterns were impossible to ignore. A customs inspector at Rigel Station reported that human cargo vessels consistently showed signs of modifications that didn't appear on their registration documents. Hidden compartments, reinforced bulkheads, and power distribution systems that exceeded the requirements for civilian vessels. A fuel depot operator in the Alpha Centauri system mentioned that human ships often requested unusual fuel mixtures. Not just the standard antimatter used by most civilian vessels, but high-energy compounds typically reserved for military craft. A salvage operator working the Outer Rim had found the wreckage of pirate ships that showed damage patterns unlike anything in his experience. Clean, precise cuts through armor plating. Electronic systems that had been systematically disabled rather than destroyed. It was the kind of surgical destruction that suggested intimate knowledge of starship construction and an almost supernatural precision in applying that knowledge. Most disturbing of all were the testimonies from the few pirates who had survived encounters with human vessels and been willing to talk. They spoke in whispers about boarding actions that had gone wrong in ways that defied explanation, crews that had vanished without a trace, ships that had been infiltrated and disabled by adversaries who moved like ghosts and struck without warning. Admiral, Fetnai reported after his 3rd day of investigation. I think we're looking at this from the wrong perspective. How do you mean? We've been assuming that humans are hiding military capabilities. But what if the reverse is true? What if their merchant marine is their military? Kextara considered the possibility. It would explain the contradictions in human behavior. The peaceful, diplomatic exterior combined with devastating combat effectiveness. The civilian vessels that performed like warships. The merchant crews that acted like special forces operators. A hidden military disguised as civilian commerce, he mused. It would be brilliant, actually. No one suspects merchants of being soldiers. And it would allow them to position military assets throughout the galaxy without triggering defensive responses from other species, Fetnai added. Every human trading post, every merchant vessel, could potentially be a military installation. The implications were staggering. If Fetnai's theory was correct, then humanity had effectively militarized the galactic trade network without anyone noticing. They had positioned what amounted to a hidden fleet in every major system, disguised as harmless traders and cargo haulers. But why? Kextara asked. What would be the purpose of such deception? Maybe they're not trying to conquer the galaxy, Fetnai suggested. Maybe they're trying to protect it. From what? I don't know. But consider their homeworld classification. Class 12 Deathworld. A planet so hostile that most species couldn't survive on its surface for more than a few hours. What kind of evolutionary pressure would that create? What kind of species would emerge from such an environment? Kextara felt a chill run through his circulatory system as the pieces began to fall into place. Humans came from a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. Every day of their evolutionary development had been a battle for survival against an environment that was actively hostile to life. Such a species would develop certain characteristics. They would become suspicious, paranoid, always ready for the next threat. They would learn to hide their true capabilities until the moment they needed them. They would become expert at identifying and neutralizing dangers before those dangers could strike. Colonel, he said slowly, what if the humans aren't hiding from the galaxy? What if they're protecting the galaxy from something we don't know about yet? Before Fetnai could respond, the office communications system activated without being summoned. The voice that emerged was distinctly human, carrying the flat, professional tone that had become familiar from trade negotiations. Admiral Kextara, this is Director Sarah Chun of the Terran Strategic Assessment Division. We understand you've been conducting inquiries regarding human merchant vessel capabilities. Both officers spun toward the display, but found only empty air. The voice continued without revealing its source. We appreciate your curiosity, Admiral, but we must respectfully request that you discontinue your investigation. The information you're seeking is classified for reasons that extend beyond Federation security considerations. Who are you? Kextara demanded. How did you access this channel? We are the people responsible for ensuring that the galaxy remains a safe place for civilian commerce and peaceful species development. As for how we're communicating with you, let's just say that human technology has certain advantages that we prefer to keep understated. What aren't you telling us? There was a pause, as if the unseen speaker was consulting with others. When the voice returned, it carried a note of grim resignation. Admiral, have you ever wondered why a species as young as humanity was granted Federation membership so quickly? Why our application was fast-tracked through the approval process despite our limited spaceflight experience? I assume it was because of your rapid technological development. Partially. But the primary reason was that the Federation Council had access to information about threats that exist beyond the current borders of known space. Threats that require a particular type of response capability. Kextara felt the scales along his spine begin to rise. What kind of threats? The kind that prey on peaceful, civilized species. The kind that view the Federation's principles of cooperation and openness as weaknesses to be exploited. The kind that require specialists to handle. And humans are these specialists. Humans are what happens when evolution creates a species capable of surviving in hell, Admiral. We are what the galaxy hopes it never needs, but keeps around just in case. The communication channel closed, leaving Kextara and Fetnai staring at each other in stunned silence. Colonel, Kextara said finally, I think we've been asking the wrong questions. Sir, we've been wondering why humans are hiding their capabilities. The real question is, what are they hiding them from? Outside the transparent steel windows of Station Prime, the endless flow of ships continued its ancient pattern. But now Kextara found himself studying each human vessel with new eyes, wondering what secrets move through the darkness of space behind those plain, civilian hulls. Somewhere out there, beyond the edges of known space, something was waiting. Something that had prompted the Federation's leaders to grant full membership to a species they barely understood, simply because that species possessed the capacity for violence that civilization preferred to forget. And humanity, the strange species from the death world called Earth, stood guard in the darkness, hiding their true nature behind the mask of peaceful merchants. Until the day they didn't need to hide anymore. The emergency klaxons throughout Station Prime began their bone-chilling wail at 0347 hours, dragging Admiral Kextara from his sleep with the kind of urgency that meant only one thing. The galaxy was under attack. He reached his command center within 3 minutes, still fastening his uniform as he burst through the security doors. The main display showed a tactical nightmare that his worst fears hadn't prepared him for. Report, he barked at the duty officer. Sir, we're receiving distress signals from 17 systems along the outer rim. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple unidentified vessels moving in coordinated attack patterns. Lieutenant Commander Yexnila's chromatophores flashed emergency yellow as she processed the incoming data. Admiral, these aren't pirates or raiders. This is a full-scale military invasion. The display zoomed to show the affected systems. Kextara recognized them immediately. Agricultural worlds, mining colonies, research stations. Soft targets with minimal defensive capabilities. Exactly what an intelligent enemy would choose for an opening assault. Who are they? What species are we dealing with? Unknown, sir. The attacking vessels don't match any known designs in our database. But, Admiral, Yexnila's voice dropped to a whisper. They're not using energy weapons. Explain. The attacks are biological in nature. The colonies aren't being destroyed, they're being consumed. Entire populations are disappearing without a trace. But the infrastructure remains intact. Kextara felt his blood turn cold. Throughout galactic history, there had been legends of creatures that fed on sentient life. Ancient stories told by spacers around artificial campfires, usually dismissed as mythology or fear-induced hallucinations. But The Federation's xenobiologists had occasionally found evidence suggesting that such things might exist in the dark spaces between stars. How long until our fastest response fleet can reach the affected area? 72 hours, sir. But, Admiral, at the current rate of expansion, the enemy will have overrun 30 more systems before we can mount an effective response. The mathematics were brutal. The Federation's military doctrine was built around peacekeeping and conflict resolution, not large-scale warfare against an unknown enemy. Their ships were designed for showing the flag and mediating disputes, not fighting for survival against creatures that devoured entire populations. Sir, Communications Officer HFY called out. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Security Council. They're requesting immediate connection to the Terran Strategic Assessment Division. Kextara remembered his conversation with Director Sarah Chun 3 weeks earlier. At the time, her words had seemed ominous but theoretical. Now they carried the weight of prophecy fulfilled. Establish the connection. The holographic display materialized to show a stark, functional command center that looked nothing like the diplomatic facilities where Federation species usually conducted their business. Banks of tactical displays showed real-time battle damage assessments, troop movements, and what appeared to be deployment orders for units that didn't officially exist. The woman who appeared on the main screen wore no uniform or rank insignia, but every person in the human command center deferred to her with military precision. Director Chun looked exactly as she had sounded during their previous conversation. Professional, competent, and utterly without illusion about the nature of the crisis they faced. Admiral Kextara, thank you for accepting this communication. I assume you're aware of the situation developing on the Outer Rim. We're tracking multiple invasions across 17 systems. Our response fleets are mobilizing, but we won't reach the affected areas for 3 days, by which time the affected populations will be extinct and the enemy will have moved on to new targets. Chin finished grimly. Admiral, I'm going to share information with you that has been classified at the highest levels for the past 15 years. Information about why humanity was granted Federation membership and what we've been preparing for during our time among you. The display shifted to show star charts that extended far beyond the borders of known space. Scattered across the map were markers indicating detected incursions dating back hundreds of years. What you're seeing is the historical pattern of attacks by a species we call the Harvesters. They're not native to this galaxy, Admiral. They're refugees from a dying galaxy cluster, and they've been slowly working their way through local space for approximately 3,000 years. Kextara stared at the data in growing horror. The pattern was unmistakable, entire star systems going dark, usually over the course of a few weeks, followed by decades of silence before the attacks resumed somewhere else. Why wasn't this information shared with the Federation Council? Because the Council would have panicked, Chen replied bluntly. Your species, and most of the others in the Federation, evolved on worlds that encouraged cooperation and peaceful development. You've built a civilization based on the assumption that reasonable beings can find reasonable solutions to their problems. And humans didn't. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. We developed very different assumptions about the universe. Chen's expression hardened. We assume that somewhere out there, something is always trying to kill us. And we prepare accordingly. The display shifted again, showing technical specifications that made Kextara's eyes widen. These weren't merchant vessels or civilian transports. These were warships designed with a level of sophistication that exceeded anything in the Federation fleet. Every human merchant vessel is actually a military unit, he asked. Every human vessel, period. Our cargo ships carry weapons that can crack moons. Our passenger liners have troop deployment capabilities that can put a full battalion on a planet's surface in under an hour. Our research stations are fortress factories capable of producing warships in quantities that would horrify your accountants. How many ships are we talking about? Currently, about 40,000 vessels of various classes, all fully crewed and ready for immediate deployment, plus another 120,000 personnel stationed at facilities throughout Federation space. The numbers were staggering. Humanity had quietly assembled a military force larger than the entire Federation Navy, without anyone noticing. They had done it while maintaining perfect diplomatic relations and contributing peacefully to galactic commerce and culture. Admiral, Chen continued, the reason we're revealing this information now is because the situation has moved beyond our ability to handle quietly. The harvesters have begun a coordinated assault across multiple vectors. This isn't their usual pattern of isolated raids. They're making a serious push to establish permanent holdings in this galaxy. What do you need from us? Nothing, Admiral. We need you to stay out of our way. Before Kexthara could respond to that shocking statement, new data began flowing across the tactical displays. Human warships were decloaking throughout the affected systems, emerging from stealth fields that had hidden them in empty space for years. The vessels that revealed themselves bore no resemblance to the harmless freighters and passenger ships that had become familiar sights at Federation ports. These were predators built for killing, their hulls bristling with weapons that seemed to shift and flow as targeting systems acquired new threats. Admiral, you're about to witness something that no peaceful species should ever have to see, Chen said quietly. You're about to see humans at war. The first engagement began at the Kepler 186 system, where 17 harvester bioships had surrounded the agricultural colony of New Eden. The alien vessels were unlike anything in the Federation database, living things the size of space stations, their surfaces pulsing with organic patterns that suggested both massive size and malevolent intelligence. 3 human warships appeared from nowhere, their approach so sudden that the harvesters had no time to react. The human vessels moved like living things themselves, flowing around the enemy formations with impossible grace while delivering firepower that lit up the sensor displays. But it wasn't the overwhelming firepower that shocked Kexthara. It was the precision. The human weapons didn't destroy the harvester ships. They dissected them. Energy beams cut through bioarmor with surgical accuracy, targeting specific organs and systems while leaving the rest of the creature intact. Within minutes, the massive alien predators were drifting helplessly, paralyzed but alive. You're not killing them, Kexthara observed. The harvesters are sentient beings, Admiral. Alien, hostile, and utterly incompatible with civilization as we understand it, but still sentient. We don't kill sentient beings unless we have no choice. Then, what do you do with them? We relocate them to environments where they can survive without threatening other species. There are several dead galaxy clusters where they can feed on stellar matter without encountering inhabited worlds. The tactical display updated to show similar engagements across all 17 invaded systems. Human forces were emerging from concealment to engage the harvesters with the same devastating precision demonstrated at Kepler 186. But, as Kexthara watched the battles unfold, he began to notice disturbing details. The human vessels were taking damage. Despite their technological superiority and tactical advantages, they were suffering casualties. Several ships winked out of existence as harvester weapons found their mark. Others limped away from battle with hull breaches and failing systems. Director, you're losing ships. Yes, Admiral. We are. Chen's expression remained impassive, but Kexthara could see the pain behind her professional facade. This is what we've been preparing for. But the harvesters are more numerous and better coordinated than our worst-case projections anticipated. What do you need? How can we help? You can't, Admiral. Your ships and weapons are designed for peacekeeping, not warfare against bioships that can absorb energy and regenerate damage. Sending Federation forces into these battles would be sending them to die for no tactical advantage. As if to emphasize her point, the display showed a Federation patrol vessel that had stumbled into the edge of the Kepler 442 engagement. A harvester tendril reached out and enveloped the ship in seconds. When the organic mass pulled away, nothing remained but empty space and scattered debris. However, Chun continued, there are other ways you can assist. We need the Federation to begin immediate evacuation procedures for all Rim worlds. Move civilian populations to core systems where they can be protected. And we need your industrial capacity to begin producing supplies and equipment. What kind of supplies? Medical equipment for human casualties. Spare parts for our ships. Most importantly, we need you to start building memorial monuments. Memorial monuments? For the human personnel who won't be coming home, Admiral. We estimate casualty rates of 60 to 70% before this is over. The stark admission hung in the air like a death sentence. Humanity was preparing to sacrifice the majority of its hidden military force to protect species that hadn't even known they needed protection. Why? Kextara asked. Why are you willing to pay such a price for the rest of us? Chen was quiet for a moment, studying something off-screen before returning her attention to the communication link. Admiral, do you know what humans call the Federation? Your government refers to it as a galactic community in most official documentation. That's the diplomatic term. Do you know what our people call it in casual conversation? Kextara shook his head. Home, Chen said simply. We call it home. For the first time in our species' history, we found a place in the universe where we could exist without constantly fighting for survival. The Federation gave us peace, Admiral. It gave us friends. It gave us a future that didn't involve wondering whether tomorrow would bring the next extinction-level threat. Her voice softened slightly, revealing emotions that didn't appear in intelligence briefings or military assessments. Humans spend their entire evolutionary history expecting the universe to try to kill us. When we found the Federation, we discovered something we'd never experienced before: neighbors who meant us no harm. People who traded fairly, negotiated honestly, and shared knowledge for mutual benefit. The tactical display updated again, showing human reinforcements arriving at the battle zones. More ships emerging from hiding places throughout the galaxy, converging on the invasion sites with deadly purpose. We've been preparing for this day since we joined the Federation, Chun continued. Not because we wanted war, but because we recognized what you had built here. A civilization based on trust and cooperation. The kind of civilization that creates art and literature and scientific advancement instead of weapons and fortifications. And you decided to protect it. We decided it was worth protecting, even if the cost was everything we had. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of tactical updates and casualty reports. Human forces engaged harvester fleets across 47 systems, pushing the invaders back through sheer determination and overwhelming firepower. But the price was exactly what Chun had predicted: catastrophic. By the time the last harvester bioship had been disabled and prepared for relocation, humanity's hidden fleet had been reduced to roughly 30% of its original strength. Thousands of personnel were dead, and hundreds of ships had been destroyed or damaged beyond repair. But the Federation was safe. Admiral, Chin said during their final communication, there's one more thing you need to know. Yes, this was just a reconnaissance in force. The harvesters were testing our defenses and measuring our response capabilities. The real invasion will come within the next 5 years, and it will be 100 times larger than what you've seen today. Kextara felt his heart skip several beats. What are you saying? I'm saying that humanity just spent most of its military capacity to buy the Federation time to prepare. 5 years to build defenses, train military forces, and develop weapons capable of fighting bioships. 5 years to transform a peaceful civilization into something that can survive a war for survival. And what will humans be doing during those 5 years? Rebuilding, training, preparing to pay an even higher price when the time comes. The communication ended, leaving Kextara alone with the implications of what he had learned. Humanity had sacrificed itself to protect a civilization that had never asked for protection. They had given up their lives and ships to defend species that didn't even know they were in danger. But, more than that, they had given the galaxy a gift that no peaceful species could have provided: time. 5 years to prepare for a war that would determine whether civilized life could survive in this galaxy. 5 years to learn from the humans who had spent their entire evolutionary history preparing for exactly this kind of threat. 5 years to become something more than victims waiting for slaughter. As Admiral Kextara began drafting the reports that would change the Federation forever, he found himself thinking about Director Chen's words. Humans called the Federation home, and they had been willing to die to protect that home. Now it was time for the rest of the galaxy to learn what humans had always known. Sometimes the price of survival is everything you have. But sometimes that price is worth paying. The memorial monuments would be built, as Director Chun had requested. But they would carry inscriptions in every Federation language, honoring the humans who had died to protect species they barely knew. And when the next invasion came, those monuments would remind the galaxy that they were no longer defenseless. They had learned from humanity's example, and they would be ready. The Deathworlders had taught them how to fight,